Hi there, and welcome to Optimal Workshop's live training session today with myself, Aidan, and my colleague Alex. Today, we're going to be taking you through a bit of a deep dive headfirst into card sorting analysis. As mentioned, I'm joined today by Alex. Alex and I are based here in New Zealand as part of the Optimal Workshop team. I myself am a product coach, so I work in our customer success team, supporting all our wonderful teams doing research using our tools. And Alex is our head of frontline support. Alex, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Yeah, it's nice to be dialing in bright and early here in New Zealand. It's about 7 a.m. for us both here. Alex, where in New Zealand are you at the moment?
It's 8 a.m. But I am in
I haven't.
sunny Nelson at the moment. I'm visiting people here. It's a really nice treat to be the top of the South Island. Where is everyone else dialing in from today? Chuck it into the comments. We'd love to hear.
Brilliant. Well, I've got the first mistake out of the way, so it's a great place to start. But yeah, it's great to have everyone with us today. And yeah, looking forward to hearing your questions and comments as we go along. Alex and I are going to be taking you through a bit about card sorting. But yeah, eager to hear your questions that you may have. Awesome. Thanks.
Amazing. Let's get moving. I can see Sarah's here from Dunedin. We've got someone from Sweden. That's exciting. While those come in, I'm going to get started. So, before we actually jump into specifically talking about card sorting today, just quickly talking about actually Optimal Workshop. What is it that we do? So, we offer 5 different tools on our platform. Technically, we offer 6 different services, including our participant recruitment service, but that's not what we're really focused on today. So we'll be focusing on OptimalSort today, which is our card sorting tool. However, if you're interested in any of our other tools, you want to learn more, you can reach out to our support team, whatever, with your questions. We've got a really wonderful blog. And also, there will be more of these sessions coming up in the future. If you didn't catch our last 2, you can find those on YouTube. And there will be more of these on all of our tools and different methodologies also coming up. But in terms of today, let's get into the good stuff. So, the whole point of OptimalSort is that it digitizes and simplifies card sorting. So, card sorting itself as a methodology, what it does is it helps you understand how an audience intuitively categorizes different pieces of content. Now, this might be because you are rejigging your information architecture, you're looking at a site structure, and you're wanting to understand how people categorize your labels. Or it could be anything as far-fetched as understanding how you might want to reshelve a supermarket shelf. The whole way that it works is that you have a list of content, and those are all cards, and then they can be arranged into categories that make sense to each participant. I'm going to show you a really quick preview of one that I've created for today's purpose. Now, you're going to see a much more detailed and technical card sort from Aidan shortly, but this one is here to show you a bit more of the functionality. So what I've done is created this preview, which I will title Judge a Book by its Cover. And that what we've done is gone through and each card is a different book. Now it's an open card sort. So my participant, which I am being right now, is going to be able to go ahead and create the categories themselves. You'll notice that my cards also have images. So within OptimalSort, this is something you're able to do. And you're going to not only have labels, but be able to add images in there. So if I were doing this card sort, I might put this one in and go, well, I'm going to call this autobiographical. And then I've got sapiens. I would create a category called nonfiction. We'd go classic fiction. Twilight, definitely classic fiction. And so on and so forth. And so you get the idea. The Dungeon Master Guide, I would say, is also nonfiction. And so a very simple way to show actually the functionality of a card sort. You can see as the participant, I've created 3 categories and grouped everything in there. And then I can go ahead and finish that. Now, what I'm going to be able to see as the researcher on the results side is the more people that I have to do that exercise, the more information I'm going to be able to have to understand how people are naturally categorizing and grouping things together. And then also, if I've chosen to do an open card sort, like in this one today, then I'm going to be able to understand what they would also name that, which is really valuable information. So jumping back into our slides, we're actually going to now pass over to Aidan, who is going to jump into showing us the results side of things, which will be really exciting. Over to you, Aidan.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, that's a fun example to get things moving in terms of judging a book by its cover, something that we obviously try not to do as people a lot of the time. We want to understand more context, but as people who are custodians of digital experiences, we know that people's attention spans are short. People are quick to make decisions and judgments, so we really need to optimize those labels that we're using, sometimes those icons that we're using. So yeah, using OptimalSort to do that testing is really key. But yeah, as Alex mentioned, I'm going to share a little bit more of a in-depth example, a bit more closely to some typical use cases of our tools. In this case, the example that I'm using is based off a meal delivery service. So a service that's delivering, a variety of different meals to various people. So you can see here in my example, which is based on labels only, I've actually just gone and taken some of the pages from the site itself and populated these into cards. I've actually prepared this one a little bit earlier so I can just finish it off while on today's session. But I'm going to drag and drop some of these remaining cards into those categories I've made. I've done an open card sort here, like Alex's example, so I can actually customize these labels as I like. These are the ones that have made the most sense to me. And that's really noteworthy because as participants, as researchers, we're trying to get our participants' unique mental models. And then through having maybe 30, 40, 50 or more participants actually complete a card sort, we're able to see the trends start to show through when it comes to some of those relationships between the cards and some of the sort of concepts that start to form when it comes to the structures of those cards. So I'm just going to finish off this card sort here. I'm going to put this contact us into business details. That makes sense to me. I made that category earlier. Recycling using the delivery delicious business, I'll put that in processes. And then I would just click finish once done there. But I'm going to dive right into some analysis for this card sort. So when we're in an optimal workshop study, for those who haven't seen an optimal workshop study before, you've got three sort of high-level tabs to really signify those workflows that you go through in terms of the study setup, the recruitment and getting people into the study, and then ultimately results and being able to conduct some analysis. So we're going to be living in the analysis section today. So initially, you've got some participants tabs or a participant tab to actually manage which participants are showing through in the data set. You can add or remove participants in this tab as you like. You can also add filters. You can also do this in the questionnaire tab, so you can ask pre and post study questions and actually filter by depending on how people have answered. So you might be able to delve into some specific user segments or user personas based off some of those questions that you've asked before or after the study. But when it comes to a card sort, we actually have a real multitude of outputs available. And this is something we're really proud of at Optimal Workshop in terms of making it really simple to create a study, but then having a real range of data points to make informed decisions with. And so this is a real luxury for people doing research to have all this richness available, but also presents a bit of a unique challenge in terms of, hey, where do we start? And so today I'm just eager to, I guess, share some guides in terms of the mindset and some of the questions to ask as you're going through the analysis process, particularly with OptimalSort. So as mentioned, this is an open card sort. So open card sorts have a few, I guess, more complex sort of data demonstrations compared with closed card sorts where there are preset categories, and because of that, a few less options and sort of different ways of visualizing things. Of course, in our card sorting tool, OptimalSort, you also have the option to do hybrid card sorts, which is a bit of a mix of open card sorts and closed, where you can have some categories preset and also some capability still for participants to actually make some new labels and new category names. So the first question to really ask is, what were the proposed category names that people had for this open card sort? And really, to get this information, we're going to look in the cards and categories tabs. I'm going to look into the categories tab first. And as I scroll down, I see a whole variety of categories that have actually been made and entered by each participant. We can see there's also a blue line next to some of these categories, and this is to show that some of these I've already actually standardized. And standardizing categories is a really important part of the process in terms of just cleaning your data just a bit to make sure that it's representing the cards and the groupings as you'd like. So an example of categorization is maybe bringing together two categories that you see as very similar, if not exactly the same. So I might do this for the about section and the about our company. I might want the remainder of analysis to show that the cards grouped into these categories are actually going to show through as if they're grouped in the same category. So I'm just going to tick both those boxes and go ahead and click standardize. So this takes me into the view where I can actually see some of the other categories that have made up the existing about section, as well as that about our company part. If I was to click on a particular card that makes up this broader standardized category, I can see exactly which groupings are making up the standardized category. And I could actually choose to split some out and remove them. But I'm going to go ahead and actually create this broader standardized category. But yeah, so standardizing is a real important way to just familiarize yourself with some of those categories initially and make sure there's maybe a bit of symmetry where you want to have some. But yeah, investigating the cards that make up these categories is going to give a lot of detail and a lot of insight into how people were actually perceiving that content and grouping that content, as well as labeling it. Also in the cards tab, you sort of get the inverse of that categories tab, where for each card, you're able to see what category it was placed into. And you start to see some trends show through in terms of the frequency of particular cards being placed in certain categories. So already in this page, you start to see some of those trends start to show through of where people are placing certain content and perceiving certain content to fall under. On these initial tabs, that's where you'll actually start to get a bit of insight into those unique mental models, because you'll see some labels here in the form of some categories that you might not have considered before. Maybe it's a new scheme of categorizing things. Maybe it's a label that is a very much sort of customer-centric language, as opposed to maybe some of the internal language that you've been using to categorize some of those pieces of content so far. And so, it's really important at this stage of analysis to have an open mind as to the broad range of ways that people might be categorizing the specific content. So if we go ahead from once we've sort of familiarized ourselves with the category names and some of those proposed category names, we can then go and investigate some of the relationships between the cards and start to see which cards were grouped together a lot to ultimately signify that they might end up together as we build out our sort of information architecture structure on our pages. So for this, we might go into the similarity matrix. And the similarity matrix is actually stacking cards based on their relationships individually, one-to-one with each other. And so this is represented in terms of maybe the meals for families and meals for two people cards were grouped together 74% of the time. So the vast majority of the time. We also see that it was similar for meals for families and meals for one person grouped together a lot of the time as well. And so by doing this with the individual relationships, we actually start to form out some clusters of sort of similar content in a two-dimensional structure here. So as we look at this similarity matrix, we're actually able to see, some core products, perhaps we could call these, just in very generic language, showing at the top of the matrix here. As we scroll down, we also see a bit of a cluster start to form, both in a specific level with a lot of affinity and a more sort of general level of affinity as well. And so that's a bit of interesting insight in terms of some of these contact us, help center, skipping and canceling cards as well. We also have a bit of ambiguity here around kitchen essentials and dinner makes families. And some of these cards that aren't really grouped with anything the majority of the time, it would seem. So that might prompt us to actually go back into some of those cards and categories tabs and see, okay, when it was grouped in places, what were those labels used? That would be really interesting to know. But yeah, we'll keep us moving forward for today's session with time in mind. And yeah, at this moment, I guess invite any questions. It looks like there's a few questions coming through. Alex and I will be taking questions as we go along and leaving some time at the end. Looks like Robert had one there. Yeah, feel free to put that one back up, team. How many participants do you need for an open card sort to get some good conclusions and insights? That's a great question. Essentially, we recommend having 30 as the baseline. 30 or more, essentially. 30 is where you start to see some of those robust trends actually start to show through. So yeah, 30 to 50 can be a great sweet spot, particularly keeping in mind how you're sourcing your participants. Sometimes we see people send out card sorts to an email list. Sometimes we see people post the unique URL on social media. There's a lot of ways to get people to take your study, but yeah, starting at about that 30 to 50 mark is a good spot. Cool. So I'll keep us moving here with the analysis deep dive. So really, similarity matrix as a tab starts to show through some of those relationships in a bit of a two-dimensional format. So it gives us a bit of a scratching of the surface when it comes to understanding some of those relationships to then make some decisions when it comes to some design and information architecture decisions down the road. Of course, though, we're not just creating a two-dimensional experience excuse me, for participants and for users. We're actually needing to have a real depth of IA. And so ultimately, we need to actually unpack how do we deepen our IA across multiple levels. So an example of this might be while a card could be grouped together or two cards might be grouped together at a very high level, we might need to actually have these split off into more specific levels as participants go through the information architecture structure or through their specific user flow. An example might be milk could be considered to be a grocery item. And once you go into the grocery store, you'd perhaps go towards the dairy section. And within the dairy section, you'd then actually potentially have multiple different types of milk as well. So lots of levels of categorization from grocery to dairy to types of milk. A similar product that's also considered to be a grocery item might be bananas. But bananas, you would not go to the dairy section. So while milk and bananas would be grouped together as groceries, they would not be grouped together as dairy. So we start to see some of those relationships will have to change, and we'll have to actually try to understand where that specific break off will happen and how we'll sort of structure those more niche groups. So this can seem overwhelming, especially if you're thinking, wow, I've got so many cards, so many pieces of content, so many pages to actually sort. But this is where the power of the analysis and optimal sort can really show through. And this shows in some of our remaining tabs here, such as Dendrograms. So Dendrograms is going to break down some of those sort of hierarchical categories in the form of the representation here, with the sort of really high level categories showing as the bucket from the right, and the more specific categories gets down to the left. So for example, we've got a very big bucket here that perhaps was represented by the top of the similarity matrix in a couple of minutes ago. This is being broadly grouped together and shown as somewhat relative to each other at a very high level. As we go down, we see that there's actually more relation for these cards in this green branch of meals for families through to my cheese board packs. According to the ways that people have grouped content, these cards are actually seen as more relative to each other than perhaps those fruit boxes and lunch boxes cards. So we start to see some divergence here, and already we start to think, okay, well, what categories could we maybe what labels could we maybe use at this high level versus maybe this lower level? We see the high level, a couple of suggestions such as fresh food. We might need to actually go back into those cards and categories tabs to really unpack some suggestions there. But as we go down, we actually start to see, okay, maybe splitting by family size might be a good way to go, and potentially splitting by specified dishes as well might be a good way to go in terms of just sort of breadcrumbing people through this specific information architecture structure. So Dendrograms is a really great resource to use. I suppose at this point, it's noteworthy that I won't be able to get into the detail on all these tabs quite as I might like, but a great place to go to get more detail is actually the resource center in the bottom right corner, where we have our help center linked, which has corresponding articles for each of these tabs that you see in app in the analysis process. So there's a lot more resources there, and also our customer support team, which, as mentioned, Alex heads up. They are a great resource to tap into if you have any questions, big or small, along the way as well. I'll just jump back over and might take another question from the chat, perhaps, if there's any more. Looks like Sally's got a question. If you standardize and it brings your percentage of agreement down, should you not combine them? Great question. So essentially, the level of agreement will go down significantly as your categories get broader and broader. So in the example that I showed there was most of the categories were sort of 5 to 10 cards, but there was one that was 17 cards. So that was significantly impacting the agreement because there was, maybe a handful of cards that were showing in that one individual grouping, but not the remaining. Really, it's up to you. If you feel that categorization could be deemed as alike in terms of the way that people have grouped it, then that can be definitely standardized together. But if you're seeing some real outliers in the standardization, you could potentially remove that participant altogether if it's seeming, this person maybe just put every single card into a category and called that category about. That might be actually a bit of a signal that we should just go back into the participants tab and just exclude that participant's response entirely. So there's a little bit of a sort of case-by-case basis to be had there. The cool thing about standardizing an optimal sort is that you can go through and look at your analysis with minimal standardizing, like only standardizing categories that are very similar to each other. And then you can maybe put two together that are maybe only slightly related to each other when it comes to the label, and see how the analysis will differ as you standardize very specifically and more broadly. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Sally. But yeah, I'll keep us moving as we get towards the end of the half hour here. Next, we've got participant-centric analysis, and this is a great way to actually see individual respondents or individual responses that are indicative of the broader way that people have responded. So here we see the specific responses for participants 43, 61, and 93. And we see that they have actually grouped the cards as about us, meals, ideas. We're also seeing about us. Fruit was a category name for those fruit boxes, meals, and break and lunch or break and lunch. So that could be an interesting one for that sort of ambiguity of standardizing. Do I consider that to be breakfast and lunch, or do I maybe think of and standardize that with other categories called breakfast and lunch, or do I call that its own category because it's been actually cut down into just break or break? Break. So yeah, some options there for some of the specific language that's used. But essentially, participant 43 here, the way that they've responded is deemed to be similar to 34 of the 58 participants in the way that they've created the amount of groups and also the labels as well that they've chose to use. So we saw this sort of represented in the dendrogram, that these broad amount of pages and cards were actually bucketed in together. So that's interesting that we're seeing that showed through here as well. And we see, they've titled it as meals, but other people have also used the label of options, plans, and cook here as well. And jumping into the 3D cluster view, which is my personal favorite to explore the real depths of IA, this is where the similarity matrix is two-dimensional. 3D cluster view is, of course, three-dimensional. And so the cards that you've had in your card sort are plotted as dots, and then shapes form around these dots where the dots are close together based on their relationship and their affinity. So if I was to actually change this specific one to show maybe just two groups to start and explore this big group. So that's showing, that bottom of the dendrogram again of that sort of broad bucket of meals and boxes and some of those meal related pages as well. So we're able to see those represented in a very high level here. If I was then to split this out, we actually see, interesting. We actually see that, okay, that sort of boxes section splits out as notably different from the remainder. If I was to split it again, we see, okay, some of those meals, those core products are shown through here. And also it looks like some of the maybe supporting content, such as the Dinner Makes Families page, Farm to Plate process, and sharing more about that process. People have categorized that as a bit of a deep dive or getting to know us or blog. So interesting that at that high level, we had a lot of sort of broad bucket of affinity, and now it splits out into, a little bit more specificity. And we also have some category labels there to maybe work with. Then looking at this other bucket, we see this is a very broad sort of about the business, important information. If I was to split this one, I see that this now splits into, oh, cool. This is actually could be classified as help or contact us or help center. And this one is more sort of blog or, again, supporting articles. So maybe an interesting note there that this green shape with the blog and some of those articles could relate to some of the articles here in group 5. So maybe in further testing might maybe see if some of these labels could end up together, these cards could end up together as well. But yeah, I guess conscious of time, I'll sort of wrap us up with what might some next steps be after analysis. And really some next steps after an open card sort might be doing some validation. Maybe we might take some of those trending ways that people have actually placed the cards in the categories and use some of those trending categories to form a closed card sort and send that out to participants and see if people have sort of a shared perception on what cards would go where if we were to preset those categories. We might do some validation with some further discovery still allowed as well in terms of a hybrid card sort, doing some presetting some of those categories, but still enabling people to create new categories where they need to fill, where they feel they need to fill in the gaps as well. Also, we could quickly whip up a questions survey, one of our other tools. You could use questions to create a survey to actually send out to stakeholders with some of the proposed labels or proposed categories off the back of this open card sort, and quickly get stakeholder feedback in terms of perhaps informing which category labels to use in that sort of preset closed card sort next step as well. So yeah, plenty of food for thought, as there always is with a closed card sort. The great thing is we can make some informed decisions from here. But yeah, I guess it's amazing how time flies when you're talking about card sorting. Yeah, look forward to maybe sharing a few answers to some questions before we wrap up.
Thank you so much, Aidan. I know that I have seen you present so many times, but I always learn something new. So thank you very much. We have a plethora of questions that have come in, which is amazing. Let's spend the next couple of minutes answering what we can. And then in terms of the others, I think we'll be able to pop into the comments of our LinkedIn and answer those that have come up that we won't have time for. So what have we got? Oh, that's a good one. So you can use card sorting for obviously unmoderated testing. I'm looking to get more results from users for testing. So yeah, unmoderated is the way that most people are using our tools, and that's what it's built for. So you can use our recruitment services or anyone's to have it so it's unmoderated, and have it so that your participants are doing what they need to do. You're not able to sit there and watch them do it, but then you're going to get all of those results. The reason I tripped up there is because I thought it said moderated, which is something that can be a little trickier, but is such a useful exercise to do. And if you were wanting to go that way with using OptimalSort, then right now it's not built into the tool to be able to have moderated testing where you're watching their screen. However, a really easy way to go about that would be to set up a call with a participant or your many participants, have them share their screen, and then you'd be able to record and have their observations out loud as they do the card sorting.
Yeah, it's a great way to go to get that sort of end data outputs captured in OptimalSort and in the app, as well as still getting some of those qualitative insights as well from the session itself. So sometimes we'll see people, have 50 participants in total, but moderate 5 of them. So they get that mix of qual and quant from those sessions.
Awesome. We've got time for one more, I'd say. Oh, I'll leave that to you, Aidan.
Sure. So what scenarios do you recommend using the hybrid open and closed? And closed card sorts. So essentially, I like to think of open card sorts as discovery and closed card sorts as validation. So where you have some existing categories, maybe you're wanting to benchmark some existing categories, you could actually do some validation work with a closed card sort. That would be a great scenario there. Where you're looking to discover some new ways, maybe you're bringing some content together, maybe you're redesigning your app entirely and looking for the best case sort of information architecture. Doing some discovery work at the front of that can be really good. So that can be really useful for an open card sort. Essentially, discovery work is great when looking to get as close to your users' organic mental models as possible. Closed card sorts and hybrid card sorts are where you're looking to bring in some of your existing language and see how that works as well. And I guess before we go, I'll just also speak to potentially this question here, which is about sharing information with stakeholders. And so I'll just quickly jump back into the app and speak to the sharing tab, which is actually a really great way to create a unique URL, which you can send out to participants, you can send out to people who don't actually have a license. And so this is a great way to get people to actually see some of those end outputs that you've got without needing to have an Optimal Workshop login or anything. So in this case, I've gone ahead and selected that share results with secret URL. And then I've selected the tabs I'd like to show through for perhaps a stakeholder in particular. And then I can actually copy and paste this in. And all of a sudden, the person who comes to this page will be able to see those tabs only when it comes to analysis. So this could be a great way to just keep people in the loop when it comes to the work that you've done.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. We are at the end of today's session. Before you go, we will be sending out a link to collect feedback from you via our LinkedIn. So please give us that feedback. Oh, and in the comments here, we would love to know what you want to learn about next, what you have learned in this time, and any other ideas you might have. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, any other questions? I can see there's so many great questions we will be addressing in the comments via this post. And so you'll be able to see those shortly.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you so much. And thanks, Aidan.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. See you at the next one. Take care.
Bye.